Over 6,000 dentists were surveyed. 13% of those surveyed had a prevalence of professional burnout. 1/3 of the dentists surveyed reported moderate to severe psychological stress. 1 in 10 dentists reported a current diagnosis of depression or an anxiety disorder, and this is the scariest one. 31% say they had experienced suicidal thoughts at some time in their lives, and 1 in 6 had said that had happened in the last 12 months.
Dentistry is getting more stressful, and I completely agree.
Going out and getting help. There is no shame in doing that.
SMART stands for stress management and resiliency training. The SMART program defines resilience at its core as really our ability to adapt to stressful life situations, because we're all going to have them. The SMART program has 3 pillars, and the first pillar is
Are you a dentist who's striving to build a more thriving, profitable practice without feeling overwhelmed by the numbers? Hey, good news, there is a better way. The Academy of Dental CPA member firms know dentistry. In fact, it's all they do. Our members are experienced CPA firms who specialize exclusively in serving dentists across every stage of ownership. From startups to acquisitions, to optimizing associate income, to advanced tax strategy, practice growth, and transitions, we're here to support your financial success. When you work with an ADCPA member, you get more than a tax preparer. You get a strategic partner, someone who understands dental industry benchmarks, overhead management, collections, dental insurance, compensation models, and all the unique business challenges you face every single day. We bring clarity to the business side of dentistry. While you focus on clinical excellence, we ensure your financial foundation remains strong with advisory that turns data into confident decisions. Join over 11,000 dentists nationwide who have a financial expert in their corner. Visit adcpa.org to find a trusted dental CPA near you. That's adcpa.org, because your numbers should work as hard as you do.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Dental Finance and Management podcast with Art Wiederman, CPA. I'm your host, Art Wiederman. Welcome to the podcast. We have now entered the second half, at least when we're recording this, of 2026. Hard to believe that we are there. We're recording right after July 4th weekend. What an amazing weekend in North America. And I say North America because my guest today is actually from Canada, but North America, between the World Cup and the American July 4th celebrations. And there was some big wedding that happened in New York City, I think. Somebody named Taylor and somebody named Travis. It was a big weekend. So a lot of really good stuff going on for, happy 250th birthday to the United States of America. But today we're going to talk about a little bit of a serious topic. And let me set the stage for the topic. So I did a little research, and there was a systematic review with meta-analysis of over 6,000 dentists in the United States. And they found some very troubling things, which is why I am doing this podcast today. Over 6,000 dentists were surveyed. 13% of those surveyed had a prevalence of professional burnout. 1/3 of the dentists surveyed reported moderate to severe psychological stress. 1 in 10 dentists reported a current diagnosis of depression or an anxiety disorder, and this is the scariest one. 31% say they had experienced suicidal thoughts at some time in their lives, and 1 in 6 had said that had happened in the last 12 months. I've been dealing with dentists, working with the wonderful people in the dental profession for 42 years. It was a lot easier to be a dentist back in the 80s and the 90s. It has gotten a lot harder for a lot of reasons. And mental health issues, stress, burnout, anxiety, depression have become a real thing. We did a podcast on this about 6 months ago with Dr. Eric Johnson, who's here in Southern California. And I was fortunate enough to meet our guest today, who is Dr. Kristin Yont. I actually met her when we were both on a podcast with my good friend Gary Takis, and I was just so impressed by her and what she spoke about regarding mental health issues. So, Dr. Yont and I are going to have a conversation about all of that in a moment. First, I want to ask all of you to please like our podcast on all of the platforms: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, wherever you get your podcasting. Please like us. I want to thank our wonderful sponsors. This is the official podcast of the Academy of Dental CPAs, 25 dental CPA firms across the United States that represent well over 12,000 dentists. And also Interview, which is an amazing product that will help you find internal mobility issues below teeth that traditional x-rays or CBCTs cannot detect. So thank you to our wonderful sponsors. So let me introduce my guest, Dr. Kristin Yont. Dr. Yont is a practicing dentist. She is in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So I think this is my first international guest on the Art of Dental Finance and Management. She's an educator and a leader in mind-body medicine. Dr. Yont is a select group of dentists in North America who is accredited to teach the SMART program through the Benson Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine. Dr. Yont, thank you so much for taking your valuable time and sharing with our audience today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It was really great to meet you on our last podcast together. I appreciate being here.
Well, I do too. But before we get going, I always like to talk about something interesting regarding my guests. And my audience knows that I am a sports crazed human being. One of my long-term clients, Dr. Jeffrey Hoy, who's now retired from his own practice. Dr. Hoy was the team dentist for the Los Angeles Lakers and the Los Angeles Kings for many, many years. He was actually a guest on the podcast at one point. And I have come to find that you, Dr. Yont, are the team dentist for the Calgary Flames hockey team. So tell me a little bit about what that's like.
Yeah, and absolutely. So yes, I've been the team dentist for the Calgary Flames I've worked with them for the last 28 years. And it's within the last 15, I believe, I've been the lead dentist. So yes, we attend all of the home games with the Flames here in Calgary. And, we're just on call if there's any trauma, particularly through the games. But now we're managing other dental, needs of the players and, the coaching staff, the administration. So we're just there to support them in their dental needs. So yeah, very exciting and can be stressful.
Oh, I would imagine. I remember Dr. Hoy told me a story one time about he had in his 4 dental chairs at one time. I think he told me it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, James Worthy, and Byron Scott. And I know the first 3 are in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if Byron is. I don't think so, but I don't know. But he just told me it's just a ton of fun. And I got to meet Shaquille O'Neal in the Crypto.com Center. That is one large human being. But he told me stories about hockey and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for helping the National Hockey League and the Anaheim Ducks, which is my team, and when they come and all that. So,
Absolutely. Thanks for.
all right. Well, let's get into our topic, Dr. Yont. I want you to tell our listeners about your professional journey and story. I know that we talked about how you navigating intense personal and professional stress early in your career. You've owned a dental practice for a long time and at an early age. Tell me a little bit about your story and what was the turning point that led you towards mindfulness, mind-body medicine, and resiliency training?
Well, I graduated early. Yes, like you said, I was 23 when I graduated from.
Would you graduate high school when you were like 12 or something like that?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. I did. I got into dental school when I was 18, which that doesn't happen anymore. And so then, yes, I graduated at 23, University of Saskatchewan. And within 3 months of graduating, I had moved to Calgary. I bought a dental practice, half of a dental practice. I bought a new house. I bought a new vehicle. And, it's funny because, I grew up on a farm in Saskatchewan. So I really feel that growing up helped me kind of, develop a little bit of psychological hardiness. Like I knew how to roll up my sleeves, right? And just put my mind to things. So I was pretty good at managing the financial stressors because as you can imagine, there was a ton of financial stressors behind owning and just buying so many things. But really, unfortunately, my tables turned for me when I was in my early 30s. And unfortunately, I went through a divorce. And that was my biggest stressful event thus far in my life. And as we're going to learn here today, that, stress, particularly chronic stress, is really detrimental to our brain and our leadership abilities. And so, going through that stressful event, I went through a number of emotional reactions, right? I started to get quite angry. I started to get frustrated. I was very cynical. Then I started not being able to sleep. Believe it or not, I started drinking more beer. I started going on needless shopping sprees. And what usually always happens with stress, right? This probably has happened to you, is, the itty bitty shitty committee starts piping up in your mind, starting to say things to you like, oh, you're such a loser. Here you are. You own this dental practice. You're managing people and you can't even manage your own romantic relationships. You're going to be broke forever. No one's ever going to love you again. And so it's funny. And those were all of my kind of stress warning signs, which, believe it or not, I didn't even recognize at the time for my stress warning signs. But it wasn't until one day where I literally couldn't get out of bed because the stress chemicals had really just made their way to my muscles and I couldn't get out of bed. My neck, my back was killing me. I had a really hard time getting to work. I had to go to work because I had divorce payments to make, right? But it was finally that moment where I was like, I've got to do something. That farmer instinct in me I'm doing was like, I got to do something about this physical pain I'm feeling. And so that's what landed me actually into a yoga class. Now, I didn't pick up yoga. I didn't join for serenity, mindfulness, inner peace, but I ultimately joined a yoga class to really stretch out the pain that I was feeling. And luckily, I stuck with it long enough to recognize the benefits that I had in my physical body because it actually helped my body feel better so I could go to work and effectively produce. But what I did notice is it actually had a huge influence on my emotional regulation and my mind, my mental state. And it was really from that moment where I started looking into, what is it about this yoga thing that actually helped me feel better? And, as a dentist, right, I'm always learning, why am I doing a root canal for someone? Why am I doing a filling for someone? I got to know the why. And it's that journey on learning why this practice helped me feel better. So that's how I got into this whole mind-body medicine thing.
Well, first of all, Dr. Yount, kudos to you for having the courage on a platform on the internet
Yeah.
to share some very, very personal and intimate details of your life. I mean, that takes a lot. That alone, to me, takes a lot of courage. And I have shared with my audience that I too have some anxiety issues, and that the best thing that I ever did was to go to a clinical psychologist who taught me about mindfulness, which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
So you and I are kindred spirits, and I will just share I am not a healthcare professional. I am certainly not a mental health care professional. But folks, I will tell you that going out and getting help, and you'll learn about some of the stuff that Dr. Yount does and from other professionals, there is no shame in doing that. And
Yeah.
and I want to make that point to all of you that if you're thinking that some of these things are going on in your life and we're going to talk about today is resonating with you, but you're a dentist and you're successful and you own a business and you treat
Yeah.
patients and I can't have any problems,
Yeah.
that is not true. So I want to encourage all of you as we go along in this journey today that if you are having some of the things that Dr. Yount and I are going to talk about today going on in your life, that you do get some qualified professional help. Let's get more into the topic today. So I know that you teach, I'd mentioned at the top, something called the SMART program out of Massachusetts General Hospital. So for people who have not encountered this, which I would suspect is most of our audience probably haven't, how do you describe resiliency training? And why are these skills becoming essential for leaders in everyday life and work and being a dentist?
Yeah, thanks. And here, by the way. Yeah, we all could use some help at some time in our life. And I do share my story with people, and I'm absolutely just amazed at how many people my story resonates with. So we've all been under, we've had, major stressors in our life. So, yeah, so that's what brought me to the SMART program. Now, SMART stands for stress management and resiliency training. And ultimately, the SMART program defines resilience at its core as really our ability to adapt to stressful life situations because we're all going to have them. It's our ability to maintain stability, right? A healthy level of psychological and physical functioning during stressful times. Now, the SMART program has three pillars. And the first pillar is really learning about how to manage your nervous system. The second pillar is about, okay, now that I know how to manage my nervous system, how do I develop awareness around my stress? And then the last pillar is, okay, I know that I'm stressed out. What do I do about it? What are some adaptive strategies that we will get into during this discussion? And so just teaching the SMART program, I mean, I'm so lucky because I can apply as a dentist, practicing dentist, I can apply these concepts to our profession. How do we regulate our nervous system? How can we regulate our tension, which gets dysfunctional during stressful times? How do we develop self-awareness? And then ultimately, create some active solutions. And then what are the role of self-care in building resilience for us? So I don't tell people that, that life is all roses, right? I tell people that moderate stress is actually really good for us. Moderate intermittent stressors are good for us because we know they promote growth and adaptation. The thing about stress is that allows us to grow is that there needs to be a sharp on to our stressors, but here's the big thing, there needs to be a sharp off to our stressors, right?
Sure.
There's a zone of stress management or stress tolerance that we have. And how is it that we can increase our capacity to stay within this zone? Or how do we increase our window of tolerance? How can we teach ourselves to regulate ourselves, to become a little more calm amongst the chaos that we experience, every single day? Becoming more resilient, it teaches us to be steady, to think more clearly. How are we effective under pressure? And how can we lead better? Because a lot of us dentists run our own practices. We're all leaders of our teams. And I find that, through this SMART program, I teach a lot about the biology of stress, and it's all evidence-based information, which is really important. I'll talk about and teach people, breath-based techniques, cognitive reframing, practices to strengthen our prefrontal cortex, which we're going to get into. At the beginning of our talk, you did refer to the fact that dentistry is getting more stressful. And I completely agree. Dentistry was stressful 28 years ago when I started, but I definitely recognize, the environment has changed. There's more time pressures for people. There's more techno stress, right? Our weapons of
Sure.
mass destruction. We are interacting with more patients that are anxious, right? There's constant digital noise. And so ultimately, resiliency training is really helping dentists. How is it that we stabilize? How do we lead well? How do we connect and communicate clearly to our patients and ultimately build sustainable, healthy, long clinical years for us to live and work in?
It's interesting, Dr. And this is all great points. I think also people are experiencing stress from just what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah,
And again, I don't talk politics on my podcast, but I have had
yeah,
several people very close to me in my life who just cannot stop watching Instagram and watching Facebook and watching the news. And I've had to say to them, listen, you and I don't control what's going on in the outside world in Washington, D.C., or somewhere else in politics or in a government or in wars. We don't control that.
yep.
And isn't it hurting people on top of just the stresses of running a dental practice of what's going on in the outside world? And that piles onto that?
Yeah, absolutely good comment. When I was in dental school, and we're talking about existential stressors, right? Back when I was in dental school, we talked about acid rain, right? That was something that happened in Toronto. Right?
Right.
I mean, but yeah, there's a lot of existential stressors in dental school for me. It's amazing. We didn't have our phones. We didn't have our computers. We don't have these alerts popping up all the time. I was in Croatia about 12 years ago, and it was during that time that I learned about the War of Yugoslavia. I had no idea that war was going on. That was going on when I was in dental school. I had
Right.
no idea because I didn't have connection to that outside world. I was so busy focusing on dentistry. Now, isn't that amazing?
Kudos to you. It's funny, I tell people when I graduated from college, we had 2 computer things I dealt with. One was Pong and the other was Pac-Man. That was it. There was no internet. We
Yeah,
had Thomas Brother guides that we had to hold on our lap driving in a car and turn the pages to
yeah.
get to where we wanna go. So it's a very, very different world.
Uh,
So let's talk about some of the new science of stress, new
yeah.
things. It's evolved compared with a decade ago even. What do we now understand about stress, the brain, and performance that we just didn't know before?
We know more about stress within the last, say, 10 to 15 years than we've ever known, right? And luckily to our imaging techniques and the amount of research going into it. But the biggest thing that we've learned in that 15 years is that stress is an inflammatory disease, right? It's like periodontal disease. Our understanding of stress has really just exploded. And we've learned a lot about how stress influences our brain and our body. Now, when I teach the SMART program in the first module, I always say, hey, now this is the most important thing you're going to learn about this program. And I bring up a slide of 2 brains. The first picture of the brain is, it's taken us as humans, 4.6 billion years to get here, right? There was an intersection in our evolution, I don't know, say 1 million years ago, where we as Homo sapiens, we either had to get stronger and bigger or we had to get smarter. And ultimately we got smarter. And with that, our brains grew exponentially. And from that, evolved in us this area of our brain right here behind our forehead, which is called our prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is our wisest area of our brain. It's like our wise CEO, and it manages all of the executive function, right, of our brain. Things like our attention, our ability to learn, plan, reason, perspective taking, make decisions, right? The prefrontal cortex, it also regulates the older, kind of more Stone Age parts of our brain, like the limbic system and the brainstem, which are ultimately responsible for our motion and our base survival. Now, what we now know, and this is due to all the research, is that chronic stress, starts to shrink back our prefrontal cortex. It shrinks back this executive center of our brain, and it grows the threat center of our brain, which is our amygdala, right? We've heard about our radar. It's like
Yes.
radar at the airport. It's always scanning for threats. That's what our amygdala is. And we know that chronic stress increases the activity of the amygdala. It also disrupts our hippocampus, which is involved with memory and learning. And it narrows our attention. It impacts our ability to care. Just so many things that evolve around leadership. So stress is like a big old pair of scissors, right? It comes along and it starts pruning back these very important, valuable connections of our prefrontal cortex. And really we'll talk about how you can grow those back, but that's the essence of, learning about stress and stress management itself.
So what you're saying is that stress actually hurts the parts of the brain that do good things for us in layman's terms.
Absolutely.
That's a great point. It's amazing that what you do can change the brain. I was watching an episode of 60 Minutes last night. They were talking about people who were learning how to drive who wanted to be taxi cab drivers in London.
Yeah.
And apparently, in order to do that, you have to pass some ridiculous, in my opinion, test
Yeah.
where you have to learn every single street and restaurant and hotel in the city of London. And they found that when people did that and passed this test, the section of the brain that controlled their knowledge actually
Yeah.
grew. So what you're saying is accurate about the brain. It's fascinating. So let's get into some early warning signs about leadership. So we look at leaders, and as you said earlier, aptly, doctors, you are all leaders of your practice. You don't want to talk about leadership. You don't want to hear about leadership, but it is really important. It's not rocket science. There's hundreds of books on it, but it's not rocket science, okay? But when you look at leaders today, Dr. Yount, what physiological or behavioral signs of stress tend to get overlooked? And how do these early signals begin to shape decision making under pressure? And dentists are always under pressure with every patient, with every decision, with every team member who comes in and says, we have a 911. How does that work?
Yeah, exactly. Every moment of our day, we're putting out fires usually, and if we're not, we're having a great day, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so really this isn't about, we're not talking about relax your way into calm here. We're talking about how is it that you can manage these intense moments? Like how can you be calm in a sea of chaos, really? And when our stress starts to build, right? Say we're having a very busy, stressful day, everybody expresses stress a little bit differently, right? Physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, behaviorally, spiritually, right? You lose kind of meaning and purpose. Why am I doing this kind of a thing? But usually the very first warning signs that we'll have, especially as dentists, because we sit in really poor dysfunctional postures all day long, we usually start to recognize stress in our body, which is how it alerted me when I couldn't get out of bed when I was going through my divorce.
That's amazing.
It affects the body, and normally the postures we work in, like I said, we end up with sore backs and sore necks a lot of the time, but this just exacerbates it, and that's the influx of stress chemicals that we have. Now, you might also notice yourself emotionally too. You might become more reactive. Do you get home at night and lash out on your spouse, right? Or your team? Do you start abusing substances? Beer. I drank more beer when I was going through my divorce, and I did more online shopping. Watching your sleep. Are you sleeping? Are you getting migraine headaches? What are you eating? Are you eating poorly? Are you putting on more weight? What's your mind saying to you? Are you starting to have bad thoughts about yourself and about your future? And so stress influences every system of our body, and it ultimately, when it's just continual, it just creates a wear and tear on our body. It's kind of like our dental handpieces. Like if you're constantly running those without oiling them, they're eventually going to seize. And the same thing goes with your own body. Eventually, your physical body's going to seize, your energy is going to decrease, and your emotional balance is going to be just absolutely dysregulated. And so, it's really important for us to understand our stress and recognize how it can influence our own brains and our own bodies.
Absolutely. So this is great information. And doctors, again, and I say this over and over again on this podcast I have for 7.5 years, for those of you that have been with me that long, since 2018. This podcast is a call to action. If I can know that one of you actually listened to Dr. Yount and what she's telling you today, and you say, that has hit a chord with me, I need to do something. That makes my whole career in dentistry of 42 years that I've been able to help people, and I've helped a lot of people. Dr. Yount, with that said, I want you to take a minute, talk a little. I know you have resources, you have workshops, you have tools. Tell us a little bit about, outside of your dental practice, some of the stuff that you do that our listeners might be able to take advantage of. And I'd like you to give out any contact information that you choose to do, so that if anybody has any questions or comments or concerns, that they can reach out to you. So go ahead and do that if you would.
I'm here to help people ultimately. Art, as a dentist, I understand the stressors that we go through. Hey, I got myself to the SMART program at Benson Henry Institute, and now I'm a SMART teacher. And so I teach SMART programs twice a year. I teach a lot of dentists because obviously they're my warm market and I really understand the profession. And so if you're interested in a SMART program, so SMART program is 8 weeks long. And with that program, you actually get a 200-page manual that's from the Benson Henry Institute. So you actually, and it's a physical manual, which is really great. It's a paper manual that you can write in. And it's an 8-week program, and we gather, it's live. So we gather with other dentists for this 8-week period of time. We have a lot of discussion. We learn a lot from each other. So I run that twice a year. And if you're interested, you want more information about the modules or the sessions, you can go to my website, which is mindbodyteacher.com. When you go to my website, there'll be a pop-up. I send out a newsletter once a month, and I invite you to join the newsletter. I don't spam people, but I really just try and every month, give small little bites of information on how is it that we can manage our stress. I've written a book, too, Art, that's
A book?
available on a book. It's called The Stress Solution, and it's available on Amazon. So there are just many references that you can have from me, and I'm willing to help at any time. But go to my website.
That is absolutely wonderful. Now, this SMART program, did you say it was an 8-week or a 1 week? I missed.
It is 8 weeks. It's once a week for 8
Ah,
weeks, an hour and a half, 90 minutes per session. Yes.
it's a virtual where you get a bunch of people on a call, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if you miss a program, it's always recorded. But yeah, it's super beneficial. Most people say, oh, I
Nice.
don't know if I want to go talk to my colleagues. It is amazing, the camaraderie that happens from these programs. It's amazing.
I would imagine some of these people become friends and they share their stuff. So that's cool. I got a lot more to talk to you about. I want to get into the subject of burnout and cognitive overload. I hear burnout all the time. I gave statistics about burnout early at the beginning of the podcast. It's becoming a challenge across not only dentistry, but all industries. We see it in accounting,
Yeah.
taxes. Every year, everybody, they get mad at us. I say, don't shoot the messenger, you owe $30,000. But we knew that,
Yeah.
So what are some of the common stressors that erode focus and performance, team engagement? And then how do effective leaders, I would probably put you in the category of an effective leader like yourselves, how do you manage cognitive overload and stay resilient in this high pressure world that we live in?
Yeah. Well, if we're going to define burnout, right? We've all heard about it. Ultimately, it's this state of extreme physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion, right? Caused by prolonged and excessive stress. It results when you feel overwhelmed, right? Emotionally drained and unable to meet, these constant demands that we have. And this leads to reduced motivation, reduced productivity. Like I said, it's like when you're constantly running your handpiece without oiling it, eventually it seizes, right? It overheats. And that's what happens with your brain. Your brain gets overloaded and that amygdala gets larger, right? That alarm system gets larger and it weakens the executive center like we talked about that's there to regulate yourself, your emotions and your stress response. And so, yeah, ultimately it just creates these imbalances in the body that stem from the brain. Now, what are some common stressors that we have? Well, oh my gosh, like we talked about the existential stressors of economics and political strain and global crisis and global warming and all of these environmental stressors, right? But on a day-to-day basis, some of the stressors that we'll have as dentists is, taking on new leadership roles. A new dentist buys a practice, right? All of a sudden they're consumed with the leadership tasks. This is a big one for me. I have a hard time delegating responsibilities to other people. Sometimes I feel like I have to do everything.
You've got to do it all.
Yeah,
Nobody can do it better than you, right?
absolutely.
We see that a lot.
I know. And so that's a big stressor for me. Managing conflict within teams. Nobody teaches us this in dental school. That is a skill that is learned. Engaging in professional conversations with teams, right? These are all the daily stressors. Oh, and then, time pressures and patient pressures and anxiety. We've already talked about them. But if we're going to talk about answers, how do we manage this cognitive load? Some of the biggest things that we can do is that I teach in the SMART program is develop self-awareness. understand our stressors and our stress triggers, we can teach ourselves through cognitive reframing. How do we choose more effective responses, right? Because when we're stressed out, we react. And when we can manage our stress and stay within that window of tolerance, it's not about being relaxed, it's about being able to respond to our stressors. And then ultimately, as a solution is choosing rest and a bit of recovery. We're not machines. We break down, and it's learning how do we effectively take some time to ourselves.
That's just so important. I mean, there's verbal skills to do. You talked about conflict. I have learned a lot about conflict because I was very lucky in my CPA firm for 38 years that I had my share, but I had some very long-term employees that we all got along really, really well. But I use terms like, so help me understand your side of the story here,
Yep.
or help me understand this and how to deal with conflict. And we're not going to get deep into that today, but that is just so important. It can just be all so, overwhelming. What are some of the early indicators that stress is starting? What do you see if you see somebody in your SMART class? What tells you this person is under stress?
Well, we know that stress, I told you, is an inflammatory disease, right? It affects our immune system. So anything that stems from immune dysfunction, right? Maybe we're getting sick more often. Maybe we are calling in sick, right? Which is not really an option for dentists a lot of the
Nope.
time, right? I mean,
Unless you want to not make payroll, no, that's not an option.
exactly. But stress affects our cardiovascular system, our breathing system, respiratory system, gastrointestinal systems, right? How does your stomach feel when you're under stress, right? It affects our leadership present, like we've talked about this executive functioning. We start seeing that we have a hard time prioritizing tasks, or we have impaired judgment, right? We start making more errors. We slow down our decision making. Maybe we become more impulsive and we start to miss fine details. Our job is about details, right?
Yep. Yep.
We reduce focus and attention and concentration. Our work is about that. Working memory, our brain gets foggy, right? We start not to see things clearly. Now, here's one of the biggest things in our job, because we are in the caring business. It really affects our social cognition, our ability to care for people. And social cognition is about how do we understand other people? How do we understand their perspectives, like you said? And when we lose that social ability, we start to pull away. We start to not care. We start to not want to be connected to others. We pull away and we start to isolate ourselves. And that isolation drives depression, right? That depression drives suicidal thoughts, right? All of this comes from the way the brain, stress affects our brain and those executive centers.
Hey, it's Art Wiederman here. You know I don't recommend products lightly. I only share solutions that can genuinely impact your practice's clinical outcomes and bottom line. That's why I really want to tell you about Interview. They've developed an FDA-cleared technology that measures internal tooth mobility, something that traditional methods just can't detect early enough. Here's what that means for your practice. You can identify cracks and loose restorations before they become emergencies. That means better treatment planning, fewer surprises for your patients, and more predictable case acceptance. Interview integrates right into your existing workflow. No complicated processes, just clever diagnostic information when you need it. If you've been looking for a way to elevate your diagnostic capabilities and strengthen patient trust, book a demo at interview.ai. That's INNERVIEW.ai. Mention my name and you'll get $250 off. That's Interview AI. INNERVIEW.ai. Yes, I know, absolutely. And you see that. And it also not only affects your work, but it affects your relationship with your family, your spouse, your significant other, children, etc.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing that we can share with the listeners, Dr. Yount, is if you start feeling some of it, ask for help.
Mhm.
Ask your closest people, do I seem okay to you? And there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Absolutely. Ask your colleagues because they know what you're going through. Go out, have a beer, right, with your colleagues. We don't seem to come together anymore. Talk to them. Say, hey, are you experiencing this? And you know what generally happens? They're experiencing the same thing as well.
Yes, dentists are such caring human beings. It's
Yeah.
been my honor and privilege to serve the dental profession for over 40 years, and that's what we see all the time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some practical tools. Obviously, one of them is maybe enrolling in your workshop,
Yeah.
the SMART workshop. But are there some other tools
Mm.
for people feeling overwhelmed, but they don't know where to begin? So maybe practical evidence-based tools they can start using to regulate stress and build resilience?
Yeah, so the SMART program, tons of tools. I got 14 hours of tools that I can teach people, but really let's start at some of the fundamental tools that we can learn, fundamental skills. I said the first pillar to the SMART program is a learning to manage your nervous system, and we call it learning to elicit the relaxation response. Now, because we're speaking to a lot of science people, I can say the relaxation response is really the opposite of our stress response. So, how do we learn to engage our parasympathetic nervous system? The most effective way to start regulating our nervous system is actually through breathing. Breathing matters. Now, not just any kind of breathing, not the short, shallow stress breathing, not the holding breath breathing that we do every day, but the diaphragmatic breathing, the breathing where you're actually using your diaphragm to breathe with. Your diaphragm, it was intended for us to breathe with it. Now, if you're running away from a bear in the woods, you're not diaphragmatically breathing, right? But if
Right.
you're stressed out and you need to engage your parasympathetic nervous system, you can take a couple of deep diaphragmatic breaths. And we know that that triggers your vagus nerve, right? Vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10, which triggers rest and digest. And it promotes that calm, composure, connection to others. And so ultimately, and first thing that I do in the SMART program is I teach people to breathe. And it honestly sounds so simple. One of the exercises that I do, and I do a lot of these exercises in the workshops that I run, is I will have people, clench their fists as hard as they can. And notice, like you're clenching your fist notice, Art, what you just did. You're clenching your fist as hard as you can. You're not just clenching your fists. What are you doing? Are you hiking
The
up your
whole body is tightening up.
That's right.
The whole body, my neck, my
Right.
shoulders,
That's right.
my brain, what's left of it. Yes, it's tightening up, right?
That's right. And think about us. We're grasping onto these tools all day long. We are physically tightening all day long, and we're generally holding our breath when we tense. And so part of this exercise is then going back into this fist exercise where you're tightening your fists. And then I ask participants to take a diaphragmatic breath. And it's physiologically impossible to tense the body and breathe deeply at the same time. You can't do it. And so then one of the first tools I teach people is just finding time throughout the day to take a couple of diaphragmatic breaths. And we might think, oh, we're so busy at work, we don't have time. Hey, well, you have to wash your hands, don't you? You have to cure composite, right? You have to walk between rooms. Maybe you have to go to the washroom, right? Take the time to just take a couple of breaths, and you'll really notice just in that moment, you'll be able to turn on that parasympathetic nervous system. So that's a big first tip.
Yeah. And the other thing, I don't know if we're going to get to this in the rest of the conversation, is meditation.
Yeah.
I learned from the clinical psychologist that I went to about meditating, and I do it at least once a day. I do it for 10 minutes.
Yes.
And what I do is I find a chair, a comfortable chair, and I sit in it, I close my eyes, and all I do is start saying to myself the words peace
Yeah.
and calm.
No.
And what they taught me was that things are going to pop into your mind. That's human nature. And when they pop into your mind, embrace them. Don't get angry about that something's going to pop in your mind that's bad. And then kind of push it aside and go back to peace, calm for about 10 minutes. And then the great thing that this lady taught me, Dr. Yont, was at the end of every meditation, it was, Art, you have anxiety. So what you want to do is you say, okay, Art, knows how to do with this. Art's a leader. Art's dealt with this. Art can make sure that this is going to work. Art's going to make sure that this problem is going to get resolved. Art can do it. And I thought that was really cool. And that has helped me. Now, again, guys, we're on the internet here. I am not a healthcare professional. I'm just sharing with you my personal experience. But these are the types of tools that doctors need to take a look at, right, doctor?
Absolutely. That was very well said, Art.
We didn't rehearse that at all
No.
either, right?
Very well said as an explanation to meditation, because meditation to, the Buddhist culture actually means to familiarize. And you just said, familiarize yourself with what's going on inside of you, right? Not what's going on outside of you.
Yeah, my audience knows, Dr. Yount, that I am an avid golfer. I am getting there. I told my wife on my gravestone, born August 14th, 1959, died whatever day I die, and underneath it's going to say, he's still working on it, like my golf swing. And I used to yell and
Yeah.
scream and curse and throw golf clubs, and I will do that occasionally, like if I'm 100 yards away in the fairway with my pitching wedge, which is my go-to club, and I don't hit it well, I might. But this meditation has helped in so many areas of enjoyment. You don't want to go on a golf course and be angry for 4.5 hours. Then what's the point? So we got some more things I want to get to. Let's talk about the mindfulness misconception.
Yeah.
So some professionals associate mindfulness with woo-woo, like how do you clarify the science behind what you teach and help people understand that these tools are not just, hocus pocus and philosophy, but they're really grounded in psychology and many years of research.
Yeah. And that's why I teach the SMART program. That's why I teach dentists, because we're all just science-based, right? And we want the research. Mindfulness meditation is one of the skills that I teach people to reduce stress, build stress awareness. Now, meditation is a bit of a wordless pursuit, as you know, right? It's
Yes,
really hard to
yes.
explain to people the benefits, right? Because it's not really about thinking, it's about feeling. Meditation, especially like you said, developing a meditation practice. And by the way, good for you for 10 minutes a day. That is awesome. But,
Trying.
well, good for you. But you probably noticed, right? And it probably took a little bit of time after all the
It did. It
frustration
absolutely
settled.
did. It was hard the first 5 to 10 times I did it. It is really hard. So one of my dear friends in dentistry is Dr. Bob Frazier, who is out of Austin, Texas. And I brought Bob out many years ago to speak to over 50 of my clients and for 2 days with a clinical psychologist on emotional intelligence.
Yep.
So you talk about emotional intelligence as a performance skill, not a personality trait. So talk about what it is and how emotional intelligence strengthens trust, collaboration, psychological safety, especially when we have leaders like yourself who are under pressure.
Yeah. So when you started practicing meditation, did you start noticing the emotions that you were feeling?
Yes, absolutely. Things would pop into my mind about issues going on in my life. Absolutely.
So 40% of our population lack what's called emotional granularity, which is our ability to describe how we are feeling in a given moment. And this is a really important trait to have, because if you don't know how you're actually feeling, then you live from a default state, which is that of kind of threat and protection and survival versus like emotional growth and connection to others. And so it's really important for us to recognize what we're feeling, because generally what we're feeling is driving our action. Right? If we feel fear, if we feel cynical, think about the actions that's driving. It's driving reactivity with our spouse, with our staff, inside our own minds, right? Now, Daniel Goleman, he's really great. Like, he's kind of the grandfather of emotional intelligence. He talks about his 5 dimensions. And the first 3 are kind of, emotional intelligence, leading the self, right? He talks about self-awareness, the importance of knowing ourself, self-regulation, the art of, once you know yourself and understand what's going on inside of you, which is what meditation helps us do, then we can recognize when something's off, and then we can respond through awareness and regulate ourselves, right?
Right.
And also, Daniel Goleman talks about motivation. Once you know yourself, you can develop intention and desires, and that desire embeds our activity and our action forward. Now, emotional intelligence also has to do with once you can understand yourself, you can understand others. And that's what's important. When you learn about your inner workings, you can apply that to other people because we are all the same. We are all wired the same. And ultimately, relationships are built, right, with your teams and with your spouse and all the relationships we have. They happen more effectively when people feel that they've been seen and heard and understood. And you can't understand other people until you understand yourself. And so then that drives social skills. Drives you developing proper communication skills with other people, understanding other people's perspectives. And then how from that knowledge can you inspire and empower other people to empower other people to perform, like increase productivity, work harder at your office. So emotional intelligence for leadership is extremely important.
I will tell you that I am an expressive. Everything is on my shoulder. I'm not a poker player. I don't play poker, right? So, and I repeat myself incessantly, and it drives my two boys, my wife of 41 years, my friends absolutely crazy. Now, my friends generally don't say anything, and I say to them, if I've told you this before, I'm sorry. I repeat myself incessantly. If you knew my mother, you would understand. And there you go, because we are products of our parents, right? But understanding yourself, you're saying, is really helpful to understanding others and to be able to handle these types of situations. So let's talk, and because you're about ready to put a bow on this, about sustainable leadership and long-term brain health. So you teach leaders to think about brain health the same way elite performers think about longevity. And when you talk about elite performers, I think of a LeBron James or Tom Brady, or in the hockey world, Alexander Ovechkin or Wayne Gretzky, those people that maintained a high level of productivity in the sports world for a long time. So what long-term strategies help leaders protect their cognitive capacity, maintain work-life balance, and sustain effectiveness over a course of a demanding career? I mean, your career, most dentists' career is going to run 35 to 50 years or more, really.
Yep.
I mean, you started early, so yours might run longer, so who knows? How do we sustain all of this?
So this is where I get a little sciencey, which is what I really love.
Okay, I barely passed my science classes, so I may turn my screen off for a minute. No, go ahead.
Well, if we look at the neurobiology, right, of recovery and growth after stress, is particularly supported through some self-care practices, right? Now, self-care can be termed soft. Some people might call them soft. They are not soft. Really, self-care practices will help to restore the balance, repair damage, repair damage of our brain, and support adaptation, growth, and resilience. So some of the simplest self-care initiatives really come down to getting adequate sleep, planning when you go to bed at night, getting your 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. Physical exercise. Do you know 80% of the population of North America does not get the recommended amount of physical exercise, which is incredible to me? Balanced nutrition, stop dialing up our phone, our food, cook for ourselves, watch what we're consuming, right? Mindfulness meditation. This is a big one because we know that developing a meditation practice develops the part of our brain, this prefrontal cortex, right, that allows us to strengthen connections through neuroplasticity, allowing us to be able to regulate ourselves better. So that means we can reduce our cortisol, adrenaline. It supports these calmer states. Now, how does this happen? Oh yeah, and another one too, we got to reduce our doom scrolling, right? We've got to put this away. We've got to not rely on it. We've got to watch the urge to pull for it and just scroll because
Right.
it's detrimental to our brain, right? We want to engage in these self-care practices because what does physical exercise and sleep do for us? What does meditation do for us? It helps us stimulate what's called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's like a fertilizer for your brain, and it helps you grow your brain back. It helps you grow that prefrontal cortex back that's been cut away by stress, right? It helps us to restore valuable connections between our prefrontal cortex and our limbic area in our brainstem, right? So self-care is very, very important to work into our daily schedules. And this is work into it. We all feel like we don't have time. We've got to make the time and we've got to carve the time out of our day.
So here's one that I learned from my pulmonologist and sleep doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I went to this healthcare center and I had a visit with a PA, a physician assistant, and it was probably the best healthcare visit I have ever had in my life. No offense to any physicians out there that I have seen.
Yeah.
And what she taught me was you should shut off your computer and your phone 2 hours before you go to bed and stop watching television an hour before you go to bed. And that is one that's been tougher for me. I am shutting the phone off at 7 or 8 o'clock. They also said that the best hours to get sleep are to start sleeping. The best hours are between 10 and 11:30 because those are better hours for your brain to rest.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting at least 6.5, 7 hours sleep, that's a problem. I'm at about probably 7.
Yeah.
But those are things that people will teach you. I assume you maybe cover some of that in your SMART program, some tips of that. So, yeah, Dr. Yount, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, doctors, let me just tell you something. Dr. Yount cares about her colleagues. I care about dentists. The dental profession has allowed me to have a career to help people. And that is what you do. Again, I tell people you're not about fixing people's teeth. You're about a better life,
Yeah.
a better self-esteem, a better job, a better relationship for your patients.
Yeah.
And your legacies, doctor, are patients when you retire who will write you letters and say, you changed my life for the better.
Yeah.
But you can't do that if you're under all this stress and anxiety and depression. So promise me, if you're listening to this, that if any of this is resonating in you today, what Dr. Yount has shared, that number one, and I'm going to let her give out her contact information one more time in a second here, but promise me you will attend a course like hers or somebody else's or something that is going to help you because it'll be the best day of your life. I mean, the best day of my life was the first day of therapy that I had. And I said, wow, we can change some stuff for the better. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Yount, with that, would you please give out the information about how your website and how people can get a hold of you and look into the resources? I see the screen there. Is that the book behind you?
Oh, yes, that is exactly.
Would you hold it up to your camera?
Yeah.
So it's called The Stress Solution
Yeah.
by Dr. Kristin Yont. You can get it on Amazon,
Yeah.
and I would suggest you get that. It looks like it's a pretty easy read. And tell us again how we get a hold of you.
So the first thing I would do is go to my website, which is mindbodyteacher.com. You can also Google my name as well. And once you're there, there's a lot of information on the SMART program and other programs that I am putting together. There's also like a little stress poll or a stress survey that you can take, and which is really great to see kind of what your personality is around stress. And I'll send you some, simple solutions. And then sign up for my newsletter when you're on my website. I won't spam you. Once a month, I'm going to send you some information, couple little tips on how to manage your stress, how to build resilience. And my newsletter is called My Mental Philosophy. Floss being as in floss, FLOSS, right?
Oh, that's clever.
Right?
I love that.
Yeah, so I speak to a lot of dentists, and ultimately, if you're on my website, you want to contact me, my email address is there. Feel free to reach out. I am here to help.
Dr. Kristin Yont, you are a gift to the dental profession. Again, my first interview in the country of Canada. That's wonderful. And again, to my listeners, please engage in what Dr. Yount has to offer. I only bring the best and the brightest. I'm sure her brain is larger than mine because she does all this stuff. And there you go. So, Dr. Yount, if you will hang with me for a moment as I take the podcast out, I would greatly appreciate it. Folks, again, thank you for the honor and privilege of your time. Please follow us on all of the social media platforms. Not too much, as we talked about, not too much. Don't be on it, scrolling 8 hours a day, but do follow us on Instagram and Facebook and our YouTube channel, TikTok, all those places. We'd love to have you as our friends. And we're posting stuff, about the different episodes. Please tell your friends about the podcast and subscribe. If you don't subscribe to the podcast, just go on to Apple or Spotify or your favorite podcast platform. If you subscribe, the podcast will come to you automatically to your phone every other Wednesday when we publish. That's great. I want to thank my wonderful sponsors, the Academy of Dental CPA, my mothership. I learned so much from all these wonderful humans. Our president, Alan Schiff in Baltimore, Maryland, and stuff. I've kind of become a quasi Ravens fan because he's crazed about the Baltimore Ravens. So we have 25 dental CPA firms across the United States, and we actually have one in Toronto, Canada. We have one of our members, our newest members, Dr. Yount, is in Toronto, and he's wonderful. In fact, I watched the fourth game of the World Series when we were in Nashville at our meeting because I became a Toronto Blue Jays fan, believe it or not, because one of the kids I coached in Little League, Shane Bieber, pitches for the Toronto Blue Jays. So, and I know his dad played golf with him and stuff like that, but it has nothing to do with any of this. But, please, Academy of Dental CPAs, www.adcpa.org. If you're not working with a dental specific CPA, please do that. And also interview, INNERVIEW.ai. It's a great device that helps to find internal mobility issues in teeth below the gum line. And with that said, Dr. Yount, thank you so much for taking an hour of your time and sharing this with our audience. It's incredibly valuable information, and I hope this is going to change somebody's or more than somebody's life out there who are listening. With that, that is it for this episode of the Art of Dental Finance and Management podcast with Art Wiederman, CPA. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.